This guy is the guitarist for a band that got signed by a major record label. He had a high-powered career as a top executive at Legendary Entertainment, and he founded a successful business called Seer Technologies. What more could he possibly want? That's the same question Brian asked himself after his startup got the big liquidity he'd spent so long working to get, only to realize he still hadn't found what he was looking for.
Things weren't resolved in my life that I thought were going to be resolved from this win.
We went to California to interview Brian because objectively, he's been incredibly successful. And as a client of Commit Action for 3 years now, we wanted to go learn his secrets and share them with the rest of you. But in the process, we started to answer a much more interesting question, one that relates to every entrepreneur, no matter what you're making or what industry you're in.
I remember the days and weeks leading up to this investment happening and thinking that like all of the stress and all this stuff would pay off from this like event kind of going down. And it was good for a day, and then after that it was kind of, things weren't resolved that I thought were going to be resolved.
So many of us are optimizing our lives to be productive, but what do entrepreneurs actually want, and what practical steps can we take to get it?
That led me on a journey to try other avenues, explore other things, learn other ways of being able to deal with life.
It's 9 a.m. on a Friday, but Brian's not at the office, he's at the beach, reflecting. Oh, and he's here in Malibu because he's recording his original music in a state-of-the-art studio. Cool. But why? Because all this represents what Brian truly wanted, and he now has the capacity for self-expression, whatever form that might take.
Him and I would talk about him being that like crazy old man who would be creating whatever the fuck he wants. That was the vibe of what he wanted to be and get to, and have the financial freedom to do that. And that's where like the seriousness came from. You have to build these certain things a certain way to have that financial freedom to get to that point, while still experiencing that now, obviously, like here and there. But ultimately, though, like that being his future persona.
This is the story of how he got here, the strategies he learned along the way, and how you can apply them to your own mission in life. It all started with Brian's life as a musician.
I was a professional musician. I was signed to RCA Records in 2005 and about 2008 with a couple of my friends that we had taken it, professionally into the next level.
That's the same legendary RCA Records whose catalog includes Elvis, David Bowie, Justin Timberlake. From the outside, Brian had already achieved what many people consider the ultimate goal of a music career, being signed by a major label. But psychologically, his day-to-day was a different story.
Back to the days that I was in a band and the fact that there was no concept of structure, and it made it very hard to kind of gain traction in a daily life, like mentally or physically.
He had all the freedom anyone could want, but the lack of order and accountability made it hard to take consistent, decisive action. This was Brian's first inkling of this idea that there's a spectrum between creative chaos and rigid but focused order, and how the balance affected how he felt in his everyday life. We can think of this concept almost like a diagram where freedom versus structure is on the x-axis and what Brian describes as traction is on the other. He knew that zero structure wasn't the answer and moved to correct that.
I realized that I wanted to have more of this stable footing underneath me. Technology was starting to provide me that. As I started spending more time going in that direction, I got more regimented in my approach.
He landed a job as Director of Infrastructure and Software for the Hollywood powerhouse Legendary Entertainment, and found the structure of business work, goals, and productivity, a stark contrast to his creative life as a musician, was actually an environment within which he thrived, at least in terms of getting stuff done. But it came at a price.
Feeling the extreme opposite of that in a corporate kind of environment where there's like a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of structure and process involved. I kind of like a mix of the two where there's a little bit of a controlled chaos.
Brian had learned that too little structure damaged his productivity, but he had overcorrected and was seeing firsthand how the red tape and regulations of too much structure could also be stifling, which led him to seek a middle path. in entrepreneurship and find an optimal balance between creativity and discipline. And he had an idea. Ever since leaving the music world, Brian had seen a problem in the media industry status quo.
After the label experience for me and my friends, we decided to kind of go our separate ways and do other things, which left me with this kind of like convicted standpoint as far as like the way that artists interact with the traditional media system.
But now with his experience in technology, he had the skills to fix it. So he founded Seer Technologies, a software business that helped artists and creatives distribute direct to their audiences. As an entrepreneur, he found a sweet spot with the measurable feedback of business goals and wins and the creativity of executing an innovative vision. And with this balance, things really started to take off.
It's very different when you own a business. You're able to do big things in small periods of time because you don't need to adhere as much to the overall structure, but you can move that forward in the course of a week versus spending a quarter trying to figure out how to move a certain initiative forward within a larger organization.
But as any startup founder can attest, building a new venture from scratch is a daily battle for product market fit, and entrepreneurs often respond to the pressure by pushing their personal productivity practices to an almost ridiculous degree. Brian found himself going down that goal and productivity ultra optimization rabbit hole, familiar to all Commit Action clients.
I got really good with like regimenting my daily, weekly, monthly goals and longer term goals in my life. And I realized that I was only looking at it from like a very kind of myopic view where it was very business specific.
Brian's navigation between structure and chaos had led him to the wrong destination. He thought he wanted amazing productivity and big achievements, but it was only after reaching the major liquidity event that he'd worked so hard for and still feeling unfulfilled that he realized he'd had it all wrong.
I got to a certain milestone that I was like looking to get to that I thought was going to be the thing that would make me feel better or make me like understand who I was more. But on the tail end of it, it actually didn't do anything aside from like maybe a day worth of like celebration. And so on the backside of that, I started doing a lot of things to try to know why.
This is where he starts to unhook an overachieving personality from this addiction of work for work's sake, and understand that what he was looking for was not just productivity or achievement, but the capacity for self-expression.
Some of the things that I started realizing along the way and working on through Commit Action was finding balance across multiple avenues of my life that I'm passionate about. Very passionate about technology and entrepreneurship. I'm also very passionate about music and the arts, and really making meaningful progress, specifically in the arts, is what I'm wanting to define as the next stage of my life.
Brian had found his meaning, and a lot of entrepreneurs can sympathize with this need to fully put their heart and soul into passions outside their core business. So he reoriented his purpose, not towards what he could achieve, but to who he would become.
And in many accounts, like I was like happy with who I had become, but I also wanted to iterate on who I was and be thoughtful about it. I realized that I needed to make specific space to just spend time thinking.
But how? As the founder and operator of a growing business, he was very, very busy. So Brian set out to find time. Caught in the currents of a successful startup, Brian was feeling perpetually slammed, morning till evening, and it was totally unsustainable, and something had to change.
Whether or not I was taking on too much, you could look back at that phase and probably say that I was.
The first step in liberating himself from the cycle of addiction to busyness was stopping long enough to step back and reflect.
For me, it was something where the space of being able to reflect, like carving out time in a week when you're really busy, seems very unnatural. But what happens in those moments is you end up coming to higher realizations about yourself and the things that define who you are and your passions, really. Like, what do I need to be actually working on?
This space allowed him to identify all the things he was doing that were repetitive and honestly didn't need to be doing himself.
Started mapping out all of my tasks that I was doing weekly on my whiteboard in my office.
Even like having his travel planned. by somebody else, with a big burden lifted off of him. Like, imagine if you're trying to do all this work and your creative energy and all that, and then you're sitting there spending all that, like booking flights on American Airlines or Expedia, and like trying to wrap your head around that, like in the peak time in the morning where you want to do deep work. He got all that time back by hiring an assistant who handled all those things for him. So we would always have something on the delegation side to create the freedom, then to do the siren and sir, the music goal, that was our second and third actions. And that's where we weren't doing a whole lot at the beginning, and that really evolved to a point of way more freedom to go and chase those bigger opportunities.
The magic happened when he realized that he was actually robbing his own employees of power and agency by withholding work from them just so he could keep himself busy. So with the help of his coach Taylor, he started building out a strategy for delegation and hiring that unusually started by booking a vacation.
That's where the stress test came up, because him and I developed, essentially, he wanted to take a 2-week break. He hadn't taken a break for years. He announced it to his team. We made that a clear goal, where a clear expectation was set. So everyone knew it was coming. And then him and I closed the gap that needed closed to get to that point. And then we put it in play, and we saw where the cracks were when he went away for 2 weeks. And the main takeaway was it was actually in really good shape. That's what we busted with that stress test. Like, he had that mindset of him not doing it, like taking any vacation. I could see it, like the burnout. And it wasn't about just taking time off to reduce burnout. It was like the overall mindset of, I need to let go so this team can have autonomy to solve their own problems and they can grow. And then I have this space to go and do what really matters, whether it was on the business with Seer or something else, to chase that creative space. Like, that was a pretty big mindset shift.
Lots of entrepreneurs operate under this belief that their business will collapse if they step away for more than 24 hours. But living like this inevitably leads to massive burnout. Taylor's challenge took this goal of delegating and getting back time and packaged it as an exam with a set date, but one you could pass while sipping a margarita on the beach. Here's the practical steps you can follow to do the same. Number 1, think long term. Set the intention and date for a true disconnect 3 to 6 months in advance. This challenge will be perpetually procrastinated unless you draw a hard line and commit, which is easy to do far in advance. So make it real. Buy a flight or make a reservation. Real deadlines make things happen, and most entrepreneurs are their most productive in the days before committed travel. Use this to your advantage. Number 2, pre-frame. Communicate intentions and expectations. Most entrepreneurs are terrified of pushback or damage to company culture if they take time off. But healthy pre-framing gives employees time to anticipate challenges and prepare for them. Ultimately, it makes the disconnect a challenge to look forward to rather than a nasty surprise for your team. Number 3, disconnect. This is a device-free vacation. Give your cell number to your direct reports, then give your cell to your significant other. If you're truly needed, someone's gonna call. It isn't a real test or a real disconnect if you're checking email or Slack. Leave your social media behind too for extra psychological reboot value. Time away from your business where you're truly disconnected is often the only way you can truly think about working on the business versus being perpetually stuck in the business. Only then can you confront the same truth Brian did. For many entrepreneurs, your default identity is busy, stressed person. It sucks. It isn't serving you. Now you know the rules for the test and you've got a date set. It's time to prepare. That means delegating and hiring. As an entrepreneur, your job is to recruit the best people available for every job in your business. Now, sometimes that person is you, but often it's not. And if you want to go really big, it needs to never be you. Here's how Brian did it.
When you start getting all of this extra time, you start changing the things that you're doing with the time.
Number 1, identify. Find everything you're repeatedly doing on a daily basis, then weekly, then monthly. You start with the things that require the least use of your unique skills. The goal here is to delegate and offload work that you're really not best suited to. Number 2, categorize. Sort your repetitive tasks into areas of focus or expertise in your business. For example, media buying or sourcing photography assets or producing reports are 3 tasks that might all be grouped as digital advertising. Number 3, match. Fit the categories to your key employees. Ask yourself, does somebody else already exist on my team that I should give this to? If yes, you've been withholding work from your contributors for the sake of your own busyness. If not, Add this to the roles and responsibilities of a future potential key hire, and keep tracking other paths someone with this area of expertise could add value with. Then make a plan to hire them as soon as your business can. So, what can we take away from Brian's story? 1, we're often at our most productive when we find a good balance between the freedom for creative vision and the structure you need to move fast and actually make it a reality. 2, but even though productivity brings achievements, fulfillment isn't a point in time. It's a state of being. And for Brian, as well as many entrepreneurs, that's closely tied to the capacity for self-expression in our lives, whether in businesses we're building or other passions that bring us meaning. Number 3, as an entrepreneur, finding the time to move towards fulfillment and self-expression in your day-to-day life means focusing on the work that matters, that you're the best at, and following a process to let go of everything else.